Ever since I picked it up, this PGYTech neck mount has quickly become my most used mount for recording POV footage. I've mainly used it for biking shots with the Osmo Pocket 3 and the Osmo Action 5 Pro, but it's also been great for more static shots, like product unboxings or usage demos where I want a natural first-person angle. More recently though, I wanted to see how well it would work with the Insta360 X5 and the DJI Osmo 360, and while I did run into a few hiccups at the start, after a few days of experimenting and tweaking the setup, this mount proved to be an excellent solution for POV shots, capable of delivering an even more immersive experience than a regular non-360 camera. So let me talk about the main issue I ran into when I first started recording neck-mounted 360 footage: heavy overexposure. I had set things up just like I would with an action camera, with the front lens pointing forward. The one key difference was that I inverted the camera. Since 360 cameras are taller, this kept my chin out of the frame when I was hunched over on the bike, while also giving me a lower camera angle that would capture more of the handlebars. And here's the kind of footage I was getting with that setup. As you can see, it's completely blown out. Trying to zoom out or reframe left or right is also problematic, it just brings my shirt into the shot. Between the two, I did find the Insta360 X5 sometimes handled exposure better than the Osmo 360, maybe thanks to smarter exposure weighting, but it was still unreliable at best. A quick experiment at home shows why this happens. If you cover one lens of the X5 or Osmo 360 with your hand, the image immediately brightens. That's because exposure is synchronized across both lenses to keep the stitch seamless. With the way I was using my neck mount, the rear lens ends up being covered by my black shirt, which forces the camera to boost exposure and blows out the footage. So overall, using the neck mount this way just isn't viable. The first solution to this overexposure problem is to switch to single lens mode, which lets the X5 and Osmo 360 meter exposure for just the front-facing lens. Right away, the footage looks much better, no more blown out highlights. On the X5, you also gain increased dynamic range compared to shooting full 360 video in 8K resolution. The trade-off though is that you're basically using your 360 camera like a traditional action camera. You lose reframing flexibility and you'll need to mount it carefully so the lens points directly at what you want to capture. That said, both the X5 and Osmo 360 do at least let you adjust the field of view for either a wider or tighter angle. Overall, this is the option I'd recommend if you're fine with fixed framing. It gives you the best image quality, saves storage space, and lets you use the footage directly without having to run it through Insta360 or DJI Studio. Just note that while the rear lens wasn't pressed directly against my shirt, it can still make contact depending on how you've set things up. A rear lens protector is definitely worth considering if the margins are tight, especially if you're wearing more abrasive fabrics. And funnily enough, if you do add a rear lens protector and mount the camera flat against your chest, it's basically like a neck version of the official Insta360 X5 POV chest mount, which by the way is only meant for single lens mode, likely for the exact same reasons I just mentioned. However, there is a solution that lets you take full advantage of your 360 camera and record full panoramic video that you can later reframe in post. The trick is to simply keep enough clearance between the rear lens and your body so exposure metering isn't thrown off. To keep your chin out of the shot while also giving yourself maximum headroom for reframing, I recommend pointing the camera outward away from your chest. By doing this, the camera can properly balance exposure across both lenses, so you no longer end up with blown out footage from one lens being covered up. The results looked great for biking shots, walking shots, And I also gain the freedom to pan left or right without my shirt blocking the view. As for the angle you mount your 360 camera, the main thing to keep in mind is the stitch line. For example, if the camera is completely horizontal, you'll end up with a stitch line running right across the horizon. You can fix this by tilting the camera slightly up or down so the stitch line falls outside the frame or is at least pushed off toward the edge. Since I often film things below me, like when I'm using my phone held close to the camera, I tilt the camera upward a bit so the phone doesn't intersect with the stitch line. On the other hand, if you're filming close-up face-to-face interactions, tilting the camera slightly downwards helps keep the stitch line from cutting across people's faces. For activities like biking though, the stitch line is much less of an issue. Because most things are at a distance, the parallax error is minimal and stitching problems basically disappear. In fact, I couldn't even find the stitch line in most of my outdoor biking footage. Overall, the neck mount is a great option for recording POV footage with the 360 camera. It can easily stand in for a traditional action camera setup, but when you angle it outwards, it really shines, letting you capture full 360 footage with all the reframing possibilities in post. That said, for more serious action, the neck strap's thinner build may not provide a secure enough fit. In those cases, an action camera chest mount is the safer choice, and you can apply the same principles I talked about here. The key takeaway from this video is simple. When filming in 360 mode, just be mindful not to cover one side of the camera too much, or you'll run into exposure issues.